Naturally, today we're going to be continuing our tier list for the cards in Gwent. We are on Northern Realms Gold cards today, and I think we'll just start off by reviewing our tier list here for a second. So Excellent is the top tier. These are cards that are played often or deck-defining cards in a good deck. So if a good deck relies on this card, it's going to be up here. Even like a pretty reasonable deck will be up here. Or they're good gold cards that you see a ton of times because they're just really great across the faction. We have good cards. These cards that are played. You see them in decks. Maybe they don't define the deck, but they're good in the deck. You see them, people using them. Okay, cards are considerations, but they're usually a suboptimal choice. These are cards that you can, like, when you're playing a deck, sometimes you might want to pick one of these to play over more of the traditionally picked gold cards you see in most of the meta decks. These can be cards like that are meta choices. Sometimes if the meta is good for a certain card, you might see it played and make it up to the good tier. But we'll just go by what we see at the moment. We have niche cards. These are rarely seen but have their moments. These are cards that, like, sometimes they're amazing, but usually you don't include them in your deck. Or maybe these are cards you might want to generate. Northern Realms especially has a lot of generation. So niche cards are typically ones here you might make off of Temple of Melitele, which we'll get to later once I figure out how to pronounce it and say words correctly. Or these are cards that are important cards and very integral to decks that aren't really top tier. Or even like really tiered at all. We have weak cards. These are cards that aren't played but could be with a buff potentially. So these are cards that usually you'd play something else over almost all the time, and they really don't have a great upside, even if you do get them to work. Then we have bad cards. These are cards that definitely need buffs, and you're not going to see played unless people are just trying to fool around with them. But these are cards you don't really want to be using. Then we have meme cards. These are unplayable cards other than just for fun. So either they have like some design issue that can't be fixed with buffs, or they need so many buffs that it's ridiculous, something like that. Our first card here we're going to begin with is Amphibious Assault. So 12 Provision Warfare. Echo, so it comes back one time. Play a non-neutral unit from your deck with 9 or less provision cost and boosted by 1 for each below the limit. This card is amazing. It is incredibly good because what you can do with this, it's going in excellent. What you can do with this pretty often is either find your cards, but what you love with this is you can play bronzes. Tutoring bronzes usually feels pretty bad, but tutoring bronzes with this doesn't because the card gets a big boost and protects it, which is quite nice. Next up, we have... Where is she? Oh, is it 1 N or 2s? It's 2 N's. Anna Strenger. So 5 for 7. At the end of your turn, boost the units to the right by 1, and Inspired boost adjacent units by 1 instead. This effect is effectively 2 a turn. Now, this card is very niche to exactly Shield Wall. Like, Shield Wall Golden Necker will play this as an engine card that's pretty okay. Shield Wall Golden Necker is potentially the best Northern Realms deck at the moment. And this card is in it, and because of that, I'm going to have to give it good in the played category, I think. It's definitely on the lower end of good. It's only played in that deck, but 2 points a turn is nothing to really like laugh at. It's not as good as some other cards, but the fact that you put Shield Wall on this and it's inspired and then has the shield, so it's kind of hard to eat through that with damage to remove it. It's just pretty okay. Like, it's pretty good in that deck specifically. Then we have Arch Griffin. Everyone knows where this card's going right at the moment. So Arch Griffin is a beast. 6 for 8. At the end of the round, he shuffles himself back in your deck, keeping its boost. So obviously the theme here is you give the Archgriffin a whole bunch of points, and then you shuffle it back into your deck via its effect and play it again, and again, and then maybe you Erland the points off. Now, let's be real here. As much as I would love, I really would love nothing more than to put this in niche because it is a deck-defining card for a bad deck. Archgriffin is not even... Oh, I guess I don't have the updated one on this. Did I mess this up? Oh, no, it's 9. Why do I think this is 8 provisions? Whatever. Anyway, this is just not it. It's like the same tier as Viper. And I think we put Viper in meme, tragically. Like, Archgriffin, the idea is cool. It just does not work out all the time. So I think, unfortunately, we're going to... It's too meme. Like, it's too meme. It really is. It has too many problems. Like, if you want to play it on the board, it gets its points removed. If you're putting points in the deck, why would you use this? You could put on something more useful. But yeah. Next up, we get to a really fun card I've actually played a decent amount with, which is going to be Reynard Odo. So he's a 5 for 7 with dual and random enemy. So Seltkirk is also 5 for 7 on dual. You get to choose with Seltkirk. This guy is 2 provisions cheaper, but you don't get to pick the dual target. That's kind of really bad. So I don't think it's quite meme. And the random is so specific, but you can do this as an opener potentially, but then you're using a leader charge on. I think he is kind of meme at the moment. We might go back and put him in bad or weak later, but I do think for the moment he's pretty meme. I tend to be kind of harsh on cards at the beginning of these videos, so maybe we'll come back and move him up, but we'll think about that. Next up we have Black Rayla. She is 6 for 8, melee damage 1 unit by 1, inspire damage by 2. With a 1 cooldown, so effectively it's 2 damage a turn on an engine. That's actually like a lot of value, and the fact that it's damage is really useful. And as opposed to other factions that have similar effects to this, it's really easy to trigger this. So you put Shield Wall on her or Inspire Zeal on her, which also gives her Zeal. Overall, she's a pretty good card. She's played in several different decks. You see her in the Golden Necker Shield Wall deck sometimes. You see her more often in like Temple decks with Demavend or with Inspired Zeal charges. Overall, pretty solid card. Another card that got buffed actually kind of recently is going to be Bloody Baron. So if we take a look at, not the Bloody Barn, Bloody Baron. So 6 for 9. He's formation, so he's either 7 ranged or 6 with Zeal. And he's got order, reset the power of a unit, and inspired, give it bleeding instead. Now, on paper, there's one problem with this, and that is Spores. Spores is just the reset card. It's 4 provisions to reset. So the upside here is you're getting potentially 7 more points if you play it ranged, for 5 more provisions. Now, the fact that this comes out with more tempo is kind of nice, but I think Bloody Baron is going to fit in the niche tier. I just think he's too specific most of the time that you don't want to plan around having a reset in your deck. And just keep in mind for Northern Realms in particular, because the Temple of Melitele exists, which I think we'll just skip ahead to and do real quick, so I don't have to talk about it. Talk about itself. This is just like a lot of things that are in niche do get played because of that. And I think it's card like that. I just don't think it doesn't make a deck or anything. It doesn't quite make it into Golden Necker, but I think sometimes in certain metas it will. And remember, I try to say this once per video, niche is not weaker than okay. And niche is just incredibly specific. And sometimes those specific situations do come up in certain metas or against certain decks that are really popular, where this might be good. But okay is just like, the card's all right. I'm not too excited about it. Sometimes I am excited about Bloody Baron. And like I said, though, we're going to skip the Temple of Melitele so I can stop mentioning this thing. So it's 15 provisions, bunch of stuff. Create a legendary unit from your faction not in your starting deck 3 times and shuffle them into your deck. So this makes a whole bunch of provisions to your deck. You pick the best things, obviously. And this is where sometimes all these niche cards we'll see play because you can make them with this and then just put them in your deck. And it has order, draw a unit of your choice. We're just going to call this Prince on Sace 90% of the time and Radovid Judgment 10% of the time. And boost it by your hand size. Shuffle it back in. Super draw Prince on Sace, give him plus 10. Prince on Sace then has a 14-point duel, which is amazing. This card is incredible. It makes entire decks. Like, you just want to play the faction sometimes just to have this. We're going to skip ahead and just say it here because now we know what it does. And I don't have to mention it as much or explain it when I talk about these other ones. It is definitely an excellent card, though. It's completely defining for its decks. You just play it, and a ton of decks just want to have it for the provisions, even despite its expense, because just boosting on Sace to 14 gives you an insane finisher. Next up, we have, is this Bloody Mace, I think? A Bloody Flail. So 6 provisions special warfare. If you guys forgot this card existed, I wouldn't blame you. So it gives an enemy unit bleeding 8, and for each soldier you control, decrease the bleeding by 1 and change it to a damage. So soldiers are a thing you can do in Northern Realms. You can spawn some. Carrick Frigate, for example, is a spawning guy. However, the fact that if you don't, this is 8 bleeding, it's just so awkward. Like, this is terrible. Like, the fact that you have to get out like 6 soldiers for this to do like any reasonable amount of damage is just so bad. It is. It just really is. There's too much setup, and it's never going to be good. Next up, we have Boholt. This is an interesting one. So he's 2 for 12. Human Soldier formation. A lot of these cards are formation. You can read it over here. I'm not going to keep repeating it after I said it the first time. And it has spawn a base copy of an allied bronze soldier on its row. Whenever you spawn a soldier, boost by 2. So as you make a copy of something, give himself 2 points right away. And then whenever you spawn a dude, you get 2 points. Now this is usually, was usually used in Reavers, but unfortunately it doesn't even make it into Reavers most of the time now because you have provisions for Adaran Garrison and Renew and stuff like that, where you don't actually fit Boholt in Reavers most of the time. So unfortunately for him, I think he's just a little bit weak. He only really is played in Reavers. I don't think he quite has the value to be played outside of it. Maybe if he gained a power, so when he got his plus 2 points, he was 4 with 1 armor. That's still easy to remove, though. Like, the thing is with him is he's too easy to remove when you just play him. That you really need that soldier spawn to be really good, and most of the time it isn't. So I think he's a little weak at the moment. but he certainly has potential. Next up, we're going to go see the not Price of Power. Let's not do that. But anyway, we are seeing next up, as I reset our tags here, Action Northern Realms. You guys love this part of the video, right? I'm probably going to forget to cut it out too. All right, anyway, back to Northern Realms gold cards. Now we're going to see the Botchling. I forgot this thing's first name for a second. Botchling. So 5 for 6. At the end of your turn, damage the highest power enemy by 1, and transforms to Lubberkin, which damages the lowest power unit by 1. So it's a 1 point per turn engine, which is not great. The fact that it's 5 power means it usually dies to bronze removal. If that wasn't the case, the fact that it transforms could actually be used to heal it, which is something that used to happen a decent amount. The only problem with this is it's not. I'm going to put it in niche. This is very good specifically for Ada, which we'll get to later, because she boosts herself by the power of the first cursed unit that appears on the board each turn, and both Lubberkin and Botchling are cursed, so each time you switch it, as long as she's on the board, you get 5 points a turn. That is very specific and niche, and that's why it's going in there. Although I think occasionally some of the Golden Necker decks will play it, but I don't see it, maybe like once or twice I've seen it, but unfortunately it only has that one use, but it does have that one use. Next up we have Chapter of Wizards. Chapter of Wizards here. So it's basically the mage's location. Got resilience, love to see it spawn and play Rune Word. So you get a mage of your choice within reason, and then it's given a shield. And it has order, spawn, and play the base copy of the last bronze allied mage you played. This is pretty much always used to spawn a secondary alumni, which you can then give zeal to if you're playing Inspired Zeal, or put a shield wall charge on. Use it to make an extra alumni. It is absolutely defining for the mage deck. But like I said in the bronze tier list video, I don't think the mage deck's particularly good, so we're going to give this niche, because that's the only thing it really sees playing. Kind of like I mentioned with Cintron Spellweaver, you can make a Cintron Spellweaver mobilization deck. You used to be able to do that with this, because you'd play this, and you play a Cintron Spellweaver and get a second copy. The same idea with mobilization, but that's just really not a thing anymore. Next up, we have someone who I can't type the little markers on it. So we're going to have to search by Witcher for a second. No. So all units. All other. Okay. Boost all. I don't actually know Cohen's how to. There we go. I don't actually know how to type in this thing on the E, so I can never search for him. So it's 2 for 6. Zeal Order, boosting all allied units with the same power as him by the amount of boost on him. So if you were to Amphibious Assault him, which is what usually happens, he gets set to 5, and everything else with 5 power gets boosted. So Uprising, this is where you use this. You can also, well, not anymore. You used to be able to do this in Blue Stripes Commando before it got nerfed back to 4 power because they were all naturally 5s. But overall, I'm going to give Coën I'm going to give him at least a good, because Uprising Witchers is a thing. It's not as good as Shield Wall Witchers with Golden Necker. They don't play the Amphibious Assault, but I'm going to give him good. I don't think he's quite on the excellent tier for the Uprising Witchers. Maybe I'm underestimating Uprising Witchers. I have played it a bit myself. Well, more than a bit, and I like it, but it's not as good as Golden Necker. I'm going to give him good. He's pretty specific to that deck. He isn't deck defined. Like, you can play the deck without him, and people have before, but I just think I'm going to stick him here. This could be like a huge short charge on Coën, and he might just definitely deserve this. But to be honest, I've played a lot of Coën Witchers. I've played the Golden Necker deck. I never like Coën Witchers. Coën is really good in the Uprising Witchers. I'm going to leave him here. He is deck defining. That deck's pretty good. Yeah, he is deck defining. We'll give him that much. We got Coodcoodak next. This guy's is it Cood or Coo? It's Coodcoodak. 6 for 6. Zeal Order, purify adjacent units. This is not it. The fact that Redanian Secret Service exists means this card will probably never see play ever. The Zeal Order, 6 for 6 on a Purify. The only time you care about this is if you're purifying 2 cards, otherwise Peller is always better. And the fact that Northern Realms, and you can play Redanian Secret Service, which comes out of your deck when something does get locked or whatever, then you can purify it. It thins your deck as well. This just doesn't have a spot, unfortunately. So like how cool of a character he is. I love him in the book. Then we have the Knight scenario, Damsel in Distress. You already know where this one's going. I'm just pulling up here so people can read it. Yeah, when you play a knight, blah, blah, blah. The important one here is whenever a unit triggers Grace, it gets 2 boosts on the adjacent cards, which one will probably trigger their Grace. And you can make a huge chain of Grace with this, especially with the Mad Charge triggering on the Maiden Shield. Knights are pretty popular. They're a decent enough deck, and this is the defining card for them, so it's going up here. Next up, we have Dandelion. Dandelion sees a ton of play because of Golden Necker. Since he's at 6 and 9 provisions, you give him your Shield Ball charge. He's hard to remove. He keeps that inspired. You boost your deck up. Just overall, just like a carryover engine, right? 1 point a turn carryover in the top unit. Every other turn you get 2 on of your choice. So he's like a card you really want to answer. I wouldn't say he's deck defining to Golden Necker Witchers, but he's definitely good in it. Next up, we have Dethmold. Another card, we all know where he's going. 6 for 8 and boost all allied mages by 1. Unfortunately, the mages really don't need to be having all their units boosted. They need their specific cards to not die, which is not what Dethmold is doing. Mages don't really go wide like soldiers or something. This effect has to hit, like, I would say, 5 to 6 mages for this to be good. That's way too specific because your mages are almost always targets, so he's going to go down here, meme. Next up, we have the Defender, Donimir. So Donimir is the Defender, 7 for 10, the 2 armor and shield. He is incredibly hard to kill because he has that shield and the armor. So to hit the shield, then get through 9 total power. Tesha Mutna Sword, though, by the way, really smacks this guy, but that smacks most of the defenders, to be honest. But it is a solid card. If you're playing a card that wants a Defender, it's pretty good. At the moment, those decks aren't too common. You don't see them played very much. He's mostly played for like mages with Leticia, which isn't a great deck, but he's also played in Reavers sometimes to protect Adarin. You can play him in other decks. I want to really play like one specific strategy, like maybe Revenants or something. So overall, I think he does qualify as good because you can do a ton of stuff with him. Blue Stripes Commandos, the Dun Banner fake Commandos, all that kind of stuff. So overall, I think he's a pretty good card. And if you want protection, even Siege decks will play him sometimes if it's not like Temple Siege where you have extra provisions to protect him. And at the end of the day, he is a knight for the knight scenario, but usually people don't do that. But I do think it overall is a pretty good card still. Next up, we have Drakenborg. Not the old version where it gave boost and that was broken, but we have the version now that just summons a unit out and gives vitality. The only thing people ever do with this is use it on Snowdrop because it gives your Snowdrop out, which summons Redain Secret Service. Because it's locked, you unlock the Snowdrop, it tutors Snowdrop. However, that does go in Melitele, which is a very good deck. So a good card is played in that deck. Outside of that, don't use this. It's really only used because you can pull Snowdrop and then purify the unit. However, you can do it to other cards. The fact that it used to do boost, you do it on Sigi and just have the 30-point order on this and reset that. Nowadays, it's really outside of Snowdrop. I can't think of anything that really uses it, but you can just fool around with it if you want to. It's only here because of the Melitele deck and it being a good deck and that good card in that deck. Next up, we have Drog. I love Drog. Used to play Revenant decks way back when, but 7 for 13, Spectre Cursed Knight, and he transforms all of your allied humans on a row into Revenants without changing their power on a Zeal order. So you spawn a bunch of tokens, you turn all the tokens into Revenants, and then the Revenants kill the tokens or each other and spawn more Revenants with 4 power. It's just really a very cool effect, really high ceiling effect, but generally not going to get you the value you want compared to something else, which is a little bit unfortunate. So I think Drog's going to fall into weak at the moment. I think if we just compare Drog, what else is 13 provisions in Northern Realms? King Demavend. And I think you'd much, much rather have him or even Kimbolt or something than Drog. Even Revenant decks tend to not always play Drog because you're just spawning Revenants already with things like Forbidden Magic, so you don't have stuff to transform. But overall, I do think he's a little weak, unfortunately. He's probably just too expensive, but he's a very, very cool card. Next up, we have... Oh, is it Egmund is his name? Is that what it is? Yeah, Egmont. So 4 for 7 with 1 armor. Veil. Veil's nice on engines, kind of like we said with Aparian Phantom. And it has order damage unit by 3. There's a whole bunch of these. I think each faction has one of these that is an engine and then 3 damage order, and then if the order is not used, some effect. In this case, it's boost the unit to the right by 1. Very fitting. Unfortunately, at the moment, this is probably not aged well because I'm pretty sure this card's getting buffed on the next Balance Council. Well, I don't know when this will go up, but probably within a couple days. So at the moment, he is weak. Once he gets buffed, which I'm fairly certain is going to happen, at 5 power, I think he actually becomes pretty alright. But I think for now, he's going to go in weak. Next up, we have Erland. Erland's a very cool card as well, even though it's kind of frustrating to play against. He boosts all units in your deck by 1 when you play him, and Erland 3 gains immunity, and has the order to remove the buffs from your deck. So you can buff up your deck with Mutagenerator, with things like even Arch Griffin, mainly with Mutagenerator. You play him with immunity, the opponent can't interact, you click the order and take all the boosts, and he's like a 30 or 40 point card. Shoop with this guy used to be super common, not so much anymore. Now you could still play him in Uprising Witchers. I've seen that a little bit, because that deck does buff itself up a decent amount. But mainly with like a Mutagenerator stuff. I think he's pretty good. He is deck defining for his decks, but I don't see them very often. And honestly, I don't think I've seen him this patch. So for that reason, I think I'm going to stick him in niche. Yeah, I've seen all these way more than him. I do think his deck's not too bad. We'll leave him in here for now. He certainly has potential. He's like a meta card, so he's going to go way up here. Sometimes he's really good, just at the moment, it's not popular to use him for his decks, really. Could just be Northern Realms in general. Next up, we have Falibor. So Falibor here is 6 for 11. Whenever he receives a boost, damage a random enemy unit by the same amount. Now, the main problem with Falibor is each time you buff Falibor, he gets taller, and you want to buff him a lot to give him really tall, so his effect keeps triggering, which means he's really vulnerable to removal. That is the big problem with Falibor. However, you can do some really good stuff with Falibor. I've seen it mainly with Ale the Ancestors, because it boosts him, and then you boost him more and get really tall. I think he's going to be... I mean, you can't do decks with him. Do I want to put him in niche? He's still expensive, and there's better stuff to do most of the time. He's played like slightly, but I haven't really seen that. I've only seen deck like once, really, in my own games. I've heard about it from people commenting about it, and other people who play the game have mentioned it. I think I'm going to leave him... I think I'm leaving him weak. I think he's a little expensive for what he does. For something that eats so much removal, like the idea here is if you're boosting him, you are gaining the value back by damaging the enemies. So if they do punish you by removing him, you've done the damage, so it's not the worst thing. But I think it's a little expensive for what he does still, potentially. I'm not a big fan. Next up, we have Flotsam. Flotsam is still pretty good. So, used to be a Golden Necker card, not anymore. Resilience, create a bronze Northern Realms unit with an order. There are a lot of cards with order in Northern Realms, so you have a lot of variety on this. You usually don't get what you want. And that's order, refresh a bronze unit's order, and give it zeal. Mainly that is used on the Temerian infantry we talked about in the bronze tier list. Or on the, the Reaver Scout. I haven't seen that deck much lately. So I think because of that, I think it's okay. It is really good in those decks. But you can just kind of play this in anything if you have a strong order. Most decks won't except for those two. But it's not too bad outside of that. Really, it's because you can play Reaver Scouts with so many things and then reset the Reaver Scouts with this. And Temerian Infantry is still decent. But overall, I think this is an okay card. At 9, though, when you get it off Golden Necker, it's amazing. But at 10, not so much, unfortunately. Maybe fortunately, the deck was not very fun to play against. Next up, we have Foltest Pride. I'm going to go stick that thing in niche in a second, by the way. Foltest Pride here has 5 power, 1 armor, 8 provisions, resupply, so it gets reduced whenever you play Warfares, and has Zeal Order, deal 2 damage to a target and 1 to adjacent. So potentially 4 damage every 2 turns because you want this crew to be active, so it's a 2-turn cooldown with resupply. Overall, really great card. You play this all the time in siege decks because you get it with Hansel because it's got crew, or you just use it in siege decks. Overall, it's just pretty good. Definitely a good card. Played a lot in those, although those decks are not as common as like the Witcher stuff, but still pretty good. And where is our Flotsam? Sticking that down there. Now we're going to go to, what's it called? It's Gerhart, right? Yeah, Gerhart. 7 for 11, Patience. Zeal Order, create and play a 4-provision spell. This is just usually tempo. It's 13 for 11 right off the bat because you're going to always see Pact, which is a 6-provision boost. And if you want to wait, you can get stuff like Forbidden Magic, Alzur's Thunder, Artifact Compression. If you wait a turn, it's a pretty fun one that people don't expect all the time. You can even wait up to Necromancy. I've done that before. But, overall, it's basically a tempo card. And most decks in Northern Realms don't need a tempo card because they really want one. They'll usually play Temple of Melitele on, Prince on Sace or something, or you have other tempo options. But it's not a bad inclusion. It is pretty okay overall. You can consider playing it if you want a tempo slot, but I just think it's kind of all right. You can play it in a whole bunch of different decks, but most decks won't include it. Yeah, I don't know. I think I like him at okay. I don't think it's weak. I think it's kind of fine. Maybe it is weak. Maybe it deserves to be less provisions, but it does trigger stuff. I'm going to leave it in okay. I'm going to leave it in okay. Next up, we have Hubert. So 5 for 8, whenever you use an order while it's in your deck, remove a counter. Well, the counters go away, summon the self from your deck. It's a self-thinning card with 5 tempo. It's 8 provisions and 5 points, which is much, much better than things like Roche, for example. It's got more power, less provisions. Overall, this card is played in a good number of decks. It's just pretty good. Like, you play this in stockpile decks, you play this in some Inspired Zeal decks to pull it out. It just thins your deck with tempo. It's really nice. Next up, we have Ildiko. So she's a 6 for 9. Boosting it by 4, so that's an order, so you have to wait a turn, and whenever you play a non-neutral unit, give it Zeal. Now, this is really actually great sometimes if everything's Zeal. However, at 6, it's not too easy to remove. Usually she gets locked rather than removed in my experience. But if you do get her to stick on the board, you get a ton of value. I think overall, she's an alright card. You can include her. Golden Necro decks sometimes do, but most of the times now, since they're mostly Witchers, they don't really need the Zeal. But you can use this. Some decks really want to have Zeal. Now with a couple other buffs, maybe this isn't the best choice for it, but still really an option if you want to have Zeal and everything, you can play this. Next up, we have Immortals. That's not how you spell Immortals. Immortals here, so 6 for 7, shield. Whenever it loses a shield while it's on the melee row, you boost it by 2. But this is a separate sentence, so whenever at the end of your turn, it does gain a shield. You look at the points while it's on melee, though. This card is amazing in combination with the Sorceress, where she removes it, gives herself points. He loses his shield, gets points. That combo is so strong, you see it in a ton of decks just because it's such a good 2-card combo. And you see it in so many decks, he's going in excellence here. He's just got so much value. Next up, we have the Istred. So he's 6 for 6, patience, drop the 1 card, shuffle the same number back, and whenever you draw a unit, boost it by 1. If it's not a unit, boost self by 1 instead. What you do with him is usually play him in Melitele decks, Traveling Priestess decks, as just another card to cycle your deck and find your stuff. If the opponent doesn't have an answer to him, you build up a bunch of charges, draw a whole bunch of cards, put him back, have Snowdrop out for like plus 16 points or something, and it's really insane. But overall, he's just a good card. That's a good deck, and he's in it, and he's actually quite good in it if you can get his order off. He's always at least going to cycle 1 card if you want to, and usually get a couple more. So he's pretty good, actually. Speaking of pretty good, we have John Natalius. So 2 for 7, just like all the other consistency thinning cards that find you specials. So he just play melee, play a Warfare from your deck. Amphibious Assault is a Warfare you'd love to see played, and you can always grab Winch to do cooldowns on your units, all that kind of stuff. He is just super, super good. He's going straight to excellence here, right up here next to Amphibious Assault, because he's usually what he finds, but just the ability to find the Warfares you want, and the fact that the Warfares are actually quite good in a lot of decks means you play him a good amount. Next up, we have the Witcher location, going to be Kaer Seren here. So, Kaer Seren, 8 provisions, spawn play, Griffin Witcher Adept, Witcher Mentor, Ranger, or Witcher. We went over all those cards in the Bronze tier list, but just suffice to say, at the moment, the Witcher deck is very, very good. It's possibly the best Northern Realms deck, and this fits in Golden Necker. As a result, this card is incredibly strong at the moment. I don't think it defines the deck, although it is the location you always pick for the deck. So it's going to stick it up here next to probably Dandelion. But yeah, very good card. Next up, we have Keira. That's not how you spell her name. We'll just spell her last name instead. Keira. So she has 6 for 12 with patience. Plays 0 unique bronze spells from your graveyard, give them doomed. So ideally, you can get up to like 3 or 4 pretty easily. You can do like 3 or 4. I actually have played a Keira deck lately. That'll probably not come out this season. It'll come out like next season. Man, that deck was interesting. But the idea is you wait on her, and then you play like your Rune Word, your Alzur's Thunder maybe, your Forbidden Magic, Practice Makes Perfect, Casting Contest. Play all those spells. And then you click your order, play them all again. It's insane value. Problem is, it takes too long to set up, and it is usually answered because the opponent has a couple turns to answer her, right? Even if you have a defender, they have a turn to like remove the defender, then they can just lock her, and then you won't have clicked her ability yet. So most of the time, she's just kind of meme. I don't really see a way for her to get buffed too much. Like maybe if she was a lot cheaper. No, she's better than those cards. She's better than these. We'll put her up in bad at the moment. I could see her being useful if she was cheap enough that using 1 or 2 spells was okay, and you didn't feel like you needed to wait for like 3 or 4 for her to get her provision worth. Next up, we have Keldar. Keldar. What a nice card. So 4 for 8 with an armor. When you play a special, spawn a Witcher student. That's great. You're going to play specials. You play this in Golden Necker. Golden Necker is a special that then plays another special. Triggers him twice. And he's Adrenaline 4. Spawn a Witcher student at the end of your turn. It is very integral to Witcher decks, so spawning the students that transform them with Adepts is their main strategy. He gives you a ton of students to transform, and he does it pretty passively. You put a shield wall charge on him, really hard to kill. Overall, fantastic card. I'm going to say he's the deck-defining card in Northern Realms for the Witcher deck, just because you just get so much value with him. We'll put him by Coën. They're different Witcher decks, but they're both really good. Next up, we have Kennet and Gar. So Kennet and Gar is an interesting one. It's only 7 provisions now for 6 power formation. Destroy enemy with 2 or less power. Whenever you spawn a soldier, increase the limit by 1. I think it was intended to be played with Reavers. The Reavers are it's a deck that people hate because it's just super polarizing, and they don't need this because it doesn't really synergize with this. They'd rather protect their Reavers and make more Reavers. So unfortunately, this doesn't really have a spot at the moment, but I do want to try this with a buffed Kaer Forget at some point. I do think there's room for this card. I just think at the moment, I don't think it's weak. I think it's okay. The value's kind of there, right? You play with formation. You want to play at range so you can spawn guys and get its points up. It's 7 for 7 right away. Then usually play like a PFI or something. You get destroy a 3. Like the value's there, and the setup's not that hard. I just think at the moment, Northern Realms is kind of dominated by the Witchers and Temple. This doesn't have a spot, but I think potentially there's a spot for this in some decks. And I wouldn't say it's weak. Like if you made this 6 provisions, well, that'd be crazy. Maybe I'm too high on this card. I'm going to leave him here for now. We're also going to stick this guy in there. King Belohun. This is a devotion card. Northern Realms does not have trouble with devotion because it has the stuff it needs, right? It has consistency and it has removal. Other things you usually lack with devotion, but they have it. So he has 6 for 8. You play a unit with 5 or less power, sets power to 5, devotion to 6. Now there's room for this guy. If your deck's playing a bunch of small cards, say like Siege, a lot of the Siege engines are like 3 power. You get like 3 points on each one. There's a lot of value there. And overall, I think he's a consideration for those decks. I don't think he's weak. Like, he has him, you can play him in there. I have done it pretty recently too. I think he's all right. But usually, if you have like a devotion deck, I think what you end up doing often is like, would I rather play this? Would I rather play Hubert? Would I rather play this? Or would I rather play like, I don't know, Ildiko or something? So I think unfortunately he's a little below. Yeah, I'm gonna leave him there. You know what? I like niche for this. I like niche for him. And this too, really. Yeah, this makes me feel much better. Yeah, niche I like much better for these guys. That makes sense. Oh, you're okay. You're still okay, though. I like this better. I feel much better about this. And this card's going straight. We're in the King category right now, I guess. King Demavend. Banish 3 cards from your deck. Order play one of them. So, you thins your deck by 3 cards immediately. Usually 2 bronzes, and then 1 card you actually want to play. Give him Inspired Zeal. Play the card you actually want to play. Then you can play those bronzes throughout the round. He's worth so many points if he's not answered. And even if he is answered, he immediately plays a card from your deck and tutors it out. And he's out there with like 7 points or 6 points now. No, 7 points if you Inspired Zeal him. Super powerful. Excellent card. Very, very strong. Whenever you play a Northern Realms deck, if you're going to play Inspired Zeal, you have to think this should be a Demavend deck. As it really should be. Then you're like, well, I guess I could justify Kimbolt maybe. That's what I did when I made the Kimbolt deck. But really, Demavend is the dominating factor in all Inspired Zeal. Next up, we have King Foltest. This guy's integral to the Blue Stripes deck because when it's the first time you spawn a non-neutral unit on your side of the board, you pick a base copy of the bottom deck. Also, hilariously, the what's it called? Blue Stripes deck was not played ever. It was a terrible deck. Blue Stripes Commando got a 1 power buff. Foltest got nerfed. Like, Foltest got nerfed. The Defender got nerfed. And then we reverted Blue Stripes Commando, so the deck's worse than it used to be, which is hilarious. But anyway, this card is weak. No, it's not weak. It's niche. It's niche, and its niche is not played. Like, it's key to Blue Stripes. Blue Stripes aren't a terrible deck. Like, they're not unplayable, but they're not good. So, unfortunately, he's going to get stuck right there. Next up, we have King Henselt. A little bit different story here. 3 with 1 armor for 13 provisions. He plays a crew card from your deck, and whenever a unit's cooldown decreases, boost self by the same amount. So what you do with him is you play him in stockpile. You pull out your Foltest Pride, you pull out your Reinforced Ballista, and then use all your leader charges at the end of round 3. And then boom, he gets, if there's something on each side of him, you're getting 10 points. Yeah, it's just really solid. I'm going to say is he defining as Siege? I think he is. Like, I think he deserves to be up here. He's a super strong card in Siege decks. Even non-Siege decks just play this guy if you want to, but I think it's only Siege decks. Let's not say non-Siege decks. I was going to say non-stockpile Siege decks is what I meant to say there. Because he's still good. Next up we have Radovid. Radovid's a very interesting one. So he's a 5 for 10. Deploy, if your leader ability has more than one charge, give it an additional one. Order, repeat. So this is mainly used with Inspired Zeal or with Pincer Maneuver because you want to do more shuffling. Overall, it's a very, very strong effect. You see him in several different decks. I'm going to give him excellent too. He's very important to the Melitele decks with the priestesses because you really need those extra leader charges. He's really important to the Henselt Siege decks. You need those extra leader charges for the Henselt cooldowns. And he's really important to like decks like Temerian Infantry, wherever you're playing those type of decks. And even like if you're just playing a Shield Wall deck, think about it. You can put a Shield Wall on him and get him another one. Like, it's pretty decent overall. He's played well across the faction in a lot of different decks. Sadly, one card that is not anymore is King Rognar. He used to be played in the Golden Necker Witcher decks, but sadly nowadays there's just better things to do most of the time. He has removed shield from all units, boost himself by 3 for each. If you remove 3 shields, he's a 13 for 8. It's okay. If you remove 4, you're looking at a pretty decent card. The problem with him is you have to be removing your own shields, so it's really just Griffin Witcher Adept. It's kind of the only card that can set this up. And most of the time, if you're playing Griffin Witcher Adept deck, there's better things to do. But I'm going to say he's okay. He's a consideration in those decks, I think. Most people are not going to play him, but it's not too bad if you decide to slot him in there. I just don't see it very often. Next up, we have Knighthood. Knighthood, a card I've always argued for to be buffed many, many times. So Knighthood plays a knight from your deck and boosted by 1 for each knight you control. It's just too expensive. It's just too expensive. The only deck that really wants to play this is Knights. Problem with that in Knights is Knights already have Lady of the Lake Oniromancy, so they're super consistent. They don't need this, and they don't slot it in. You could argue playing this in a different deck, because if you play, like specifically Prince on Sace, you could play Prince on Sace with this and give it boost to give it like more damage and give it duel right away with formation. That's the one big upside of this card. I really want to try that out, but I've never gotten it to really work. I think it's just too expensive. This card is too expensive. That's all there is to it. I think at 8, this card sees actual slim play. Next up, we have Leticia. She is the defining card for mages, even more so than the Chapter Wizards, because she gives your patience cards patience equal to the turn she's been out. So you stick her out there, hope the opponent doesn't kill her. After like 5 turns, instead of getting 1 patience, your dudes get 5 patience, which is amazing and makes your alumni giant. That's how you get like 20 damage alumni and stuff. She is an answer or you lose the game card, but she is going to be niche because she's in the mage deck. Next up, we have a Mad Keën. This guy is pretty awful. So 6 for 8 with formation, damage any unit by the amount he's boosted, and death will reset own power. Obviously here, I'm going to repeat the mantra again. Damage is good when you prevent the opponent from getting points, or when the damage is high enough that the value is there compared to if it was a point slam. So for example here, Death will reset himself means the damage has to be enough that you're preventing the opponent's guys. Like if you do 6 damage to stop a, say, Carrick Frigate, is that going to be worth it if he resets himself by 6 when I could just play something else like Mastercrafted Spear? Probably not, because you're losing the 6 points of boost. And if you're not doing that, where it does get interesting is sometimes you'll boost this guy up. If you just make him off a Temple of Melitele, I've done this before. You make him off of Melitele. Say they like pull your on Sace, or like you drew on Sace or something. You can draw it, Mad Keën, with the Temple, and then get it like +10, do 10 damage, and not reset himself. But realistically, this card's terrible. It's kind of meme. The fact that the Deathfall resets him is a huge drawback. That boosting him is really just not worth it, because otherwise you'd want to like boost something that actually gets value from it. Like this gets damage value, but the fact you can't use the damage value to kill stuff because he'll reset himself. If you boost him too high, let's say we boost this guy like 10 points, it's pretty hard to actually hit something and not kill it to reset himself. So he's going to stay down here, pretty unfortunately. Next up, we have Margarita. Pretty quick one here. She's Zeal Order, give a unit lock, 6 for 6. Lock is quite good. The fact that it's the in-faction lock can be played with the Amphibious Assault makes it really good, and it's played in a ton of decks, like all across the faction, which makes it an excellent card. Next up, we have Melitele herself. So she's a 3 for 14. She's got a bunch of different effects. Basically, what you do with her is you shuffle her back in the deck, which triggers an incremental effect. Each time it was one, then the next one. That boosts the value on them by 1. Usually you see Traveling Priestess played over her. You can play her in those decks. I've seen her. She's pretty defining for those decks, but honestly, Traveling Priestess is more deck defining than she is. Because you can just play the deck completely fine without her. But the fact that there are some with her that take advantage of like robo boosting, I'm going to put her up here. I could see an argument for her to being good, but she totally defines her decks. It's just that the ones without her and with Priestess are still good. Next up, we have Mutagenerator. This is a card. Whenever you play a unit that's on your melee row, it boosts 5 units on your side of the board by 1. And you play at range, it boosts 5 things in your deck by 1. This is the ultimate setup card. You play this, you play your engines range, everything in your deck is like 5 provisions, for example, like 15 5-provision cards, and you boost them. You're losing the round, you start playing on melee. And you just put so many points in your deck that in the later rounds, your engines are way boosted and can't die and get insane value. So this is an excellent card. It is super strong in its decks. Like, it goes with the Erland. I think I put Erland up here, right? Erland and Niche. It's not just an Erland, though. You play this in Siege, you play this with Kimbolt, you play this in other decks. You play this like Century and Royal Guards, although you don't see that very often. It has a ton of uses. I think it's just incredibly powerful and defines a lot of different decks. Next up, we have the... Oh, what's this guy called? This is the Syndicate and Square's Hell crossover card, so you can play this in Syndicate or Northern Realms. So 5 for 7, whenever he receives a boost, Nathaniel Pastodi, giving it random enemy bleeding 2. Now, this is not the worst synergy. Northern Realms does do a lot of boosting, but 2 bleeding isn't great. Like, it's good value if you boost it by 1 each turn. It gives out 2 bleeding, but often the bleeding will like go on the same card, or the bleeding takes time to go off, so it's a really delayed engine. And overall, I just think he's a little bit weak. I think he's bad, actually. Like, even if you're playing a boost-based deck, if you give this guy a bunch of boosts, it takes so long for the bleeding to take effect that it's not... Like, you have to play in a longer round with him, and then if you're already in a longer round because you're boosting him like each turn, then it takes turns for the bleeding to go off. It's just not good. I would consider meme, but there's actually like enough synergy here that I'm going to stick him in bad. Next up, we have Mother... Is it Mother Nenica, or is it just Nenica? It's just Nenica. So 5 for 9 with Zeal Order range, boosts the unit by 1. She plays for 9 total value on a 9 provision card, 4 of which is boosting. The fact you spread the boost out is kind of nice. The fact that it's 9 for 9 is just not it. I think she's bad. I don't even think she's in weak. I think she needs she's not good. Unfortunately. She's such a integral character to the books. Not integral. She shows up quite a bit, though. Next up, we have Odrin. We have Odrin here. Odrin's a one-man crew. Odrin's 5 provisions for a 6-power dude counts as 2 units for a crew. I think Odrin's okay. I play him off every now and then in Siege. Actually, I think I play him more often than most people do. But I have seen other people play him. Like, he just triggers your crew. If you got something like Faultless Pride, it's actually really helpful in a short round to have something like this that can give you the crew right away without needing leader charges or something. I just think he's all right. You can consider him in the Siege decks, mainly because he is so cheap. At 5 provisions, you can kind of make an argument to put him in a lot of decks that have crews. Next up is going to be Philippa Blind Fury. If we can spell Philippa correctly, that'd be nice. So, she's a 1 for 11. It does 4, 3, 2, 1 damage. So she does a total of 10 damage, which is a ton of damage. That is a lot of damage. So she's 11 for 11, with 10 of which is damage. 4 is targeted. So usually what happens is if they play something that spawns 2, like the obvious example here is going to be Waters of Broccolon. If they play that, this can kill them both if it hits correctly. Like, you don't want to stack the 4 than the 3. But if they play like one big guy, for example, say they play a Keltalus, it just eats the 10 damage and dies. Overall, I think she's okay. She's not usually picked just because it's much, much better to get her off of Temple of Melitele than actually play her in your deck. But, no, I think she's going to be weak because of that. Like, let's just be real here. The fact that Temple exists makes a ton of these cards just bad because you'd much rather get them off the Temple than pay the provisions to include them in her deck. So I think she's weak. I think at maybe 10 she might be played, though. Prince Ansace. Where is he? He's got Formation, 4 damage, Inspired Duel. You always put Temple of Melitele on him, or you can put Shield Wall on him. He's tons of uses. Bam. excellent. One of the best cards in the entire faction. The fact that you can duel at 14, he gets 14 points, he kills pretty much anything. It's so big of a point swing that they have last say on this. You just feel like it's kind of hopeless a lot of the time. Next up, we have Prince. Oh boy. Speaking of princes, where is Stennis? 4 for 8 with melee boost the unit by 4, or range boost 4 units by 4. This is worse than Nenica because it has to be 4 different units when you play this. You can't store them up and put them on the same guy. 8 for 8 is just, it's really bad. There's no value in the boost. You really have to take advantage of the boost triggering something else. The fact that's target 4 different things means like Nenica, for example, save Temerian Infantry, where it gives out a damage each time you get boosted. Nenica can get you 4 points because it put 4 boosts on it for 4 value. Stennis can't. You can only boost it 1 time, which means you'd have to have multiple engines triggering with that. That's not realistic. This card is awful. It's going to go in meme tier. Next up, we have Ada, Princess Ada. So she has Devotion Immunity, which in the Northern Realms is pretty easy to get Devotion. This is something you can make. Oftentimes, you might make this off Temple of Melitele if you're playing Revenants, just for example. But you can also make a deck based around her, where you're using like Lubberkin and stuff, who we talked about already. And the first time a cursed unit enters the battlefield during your turn, boosts self by its base power. So it's going to go alongside Lubberkin. Same kind of reasoning. She's pretty niche in her decks, but her decks aren't too bad. Well, actually, pretty bad, but she is very important to them. You can do a lot of stuff with her. Just sometimes you'll make her off Temple, but she's really niche. You're not going to play her in her own deck. Same thing with Princess Pavetta, 6 for 8. Shuffle a bronze non-neutral unit in all copies from Graveyard's deck. You shuffle back in your Blue Stripes Commandos. You shuffle back in your Dun Banners. You can shuffle back in Revenants. If you're playing like an Erland deck, you can shuffle something in when Erland boost everything, then eat all the points off it. That's kind of fun. I've seen that. But overall, very, very niche. Like, she's very specific to her decks. Yeah, I'm gonna stick you up here though. Let's be real. Let's stick Erland up there. We're being mean to Erland. He does make decks. Let's be real. I don't want to be too mean to Erland. He does deserve to be up there. Next up, we have Priscilla. Ori. It's not Lord of the Rings, although I did play one of the Lord of the Rings card games the other day. Priscilla, 6 for 9. Seal Order, heal unit by 4, reset its cooldown. Inspired, or reduce reset cooldown. Inspired is boost by 4 instead of heal. Resetting cooldowns can be nice, but most of the long cooldowns are just too expensive. Like the best one here is War Elephant or Rafard's Vengeance, but I mean, she needs buffs really. She's too expensive. Like this. Winch reduces cooldown by 3 and it costs 4 provisions. Like, this is way too expensive. I really miss when she and Dandelion had synergies. Next up, we have Prophet Lebioda. Another crossover with Syndicate here. So 8 for 8. Whenever you play a unit next to him, it gets a shield. Now, theoretically, this is kind of nice. It protects your engines. Northern Realms is an engine-based deck. But the thing is, usually you'd rather protect your engines with cards like Muta Generator that develop more value, or cards or just like Shield Wall charges, stuff like that. So really, he's a little weak. Yeah, he's just a little weak. You don't like paying so much for him. Like, on the face of it, it's not bad. Like, it's not a bad idea. Like, since King Rognar kind of fell off. You do occasionally see King Rognar in the Witcher decks with the Adepts. Not too often, but you do see him sometimes in there. You don't consider him. Like, you don't consider Lebioda like you would King Rognar. And since he's not like a top tier card anymore, you don't see too much of Lebioda. Next up, we have Queen Adalia. She spawns a base copy of a bronze non-neutral from your hand and gives a shield. This has a lot of applications. You can do this for things like Reavers, which love this card. You can do it for just generic engine decks that want this. You can do this with Sintren Royal Guards. It's another really great one. You can play it even like as Ankara Ballista is kind of okay. Overall, though, you kind of relegate it to Reavers and stuff like that really want to spam out copies. But she's pretty good in those. I think Reavers are pretty bad, but she has more uses than that. You can play her in Arbalister spam decks with Mangonels, and that's what's going to keep her up out of this niche tier, I think, because that is much better as a strategy. I think she's pretty good. You can make a lot of different copies of this, and a lot of them have really good value. And the fact that she gives a shield makes it kind of hard to remove. It's not like Rune Word where you're getting a random card, you're getting a copy in your hand. So I just think she's pretty good. On kind of the same lines as Ramon for Nilfgaard. Queen Meve. I love Queen Meve. 7 for 9 with 2 armor. She's really hard to kill. And then she's got Timer, reduce the timer by 1 on her deploy. So she has Timer 3, boost all units that you have by 1. And whenever she gains an armor, or a boost, she gains armor. So she's really hard to kill, like I said. She gives you a whole bunch of points if you're row swarming. And she can reduce the timer down to 1 if you have 2 inspired cards out next to each other to get her effect right away. Queen Meave is a deck-defining card for like Queen Meave decks. Queen Meave decks are actually pretty good. Like Queen Meave Golden Necker. Now that she's 9 provisions. I think she deserves to be up here. Who else deserves to be up there is going to be Radovid Judgment. This guy. So when you use your last leader charge, if you're in Devotion, he summons himself from your deck. Set order, damage any unit by 0, increase it by 1 for each time you used your leader ability. So this guy released, he was completely trash because he didn't have the bottom effect. Now he does. And let's just talk about this guy. So 5 for 10 summoning out your deck, better than Roche. And then it has probably 5 damage, 4 or 5 damage on its order. So potentially summons 10 damage out of your deck when you use your last order. Obviously, you can't use the same turn, because if you use your last order, you won't have Zeal, like for Inspired Zeal, for example. But it's a very threatening card. You like play something else, and then use your last leader charge to pull them out, and the opponent has to pick what they answer. Super strong card. He's going up here, and excellent too. Also put him next to himself. Rafard's Vengeance, also going up there. Some very strong cards in here. Rafard's Vengeance plays a bronze from your hand and draws a card. It's incredibly good. Whenever you play a unit next to this card, damage a random enemy by 2. If it is a crew, whenever you play a unit, and then mages count for crews. So overall, it just cycles cards out of your deck, or out of your hand, faster and draws a card each time. So it cycles your deck while developing engines multiple in a turn. This is incredibly good. Let's put it by Demavend. Do I want to put this in good? Do I want to put this guy in good? I mean, these 3 cards kind of together. These 4 are kind of the Temple Demavend deck right here. Like, that is the deck. It's so strong. Like, you have to kill it. And you can play it outside of Temple Demavend decks. You just play it with an Inspired Zeal charge and like Siege, for example, if you're playing Inspired Zeal Siege. So I think that the fact that you play this Inspired Zeal Siege will get it in this tier. Otherwise, I'd really consider the good tier for it. But I think this is okay. Next up, we have Kimbolt. I love Kimbolt. Fun fact for you guys, we made that Kimbolt deck a while back, like Kimbolt Siege. I think it's still the most upvoted pincer maneuver deck on the Gwent website we're currently on. Like Gwent, if you go to like the other realms, pincer maneuver, we have the most upvoted deck. If you guys are seeing this, you'll upvote it again, because I think it's really funny that that's the most upvoted deck. But yeah, I think Kimbolt is incredibly underrated. But the fact that he's underrated, we'll read what he does real quick. Boost 3 bronzes in your deck by 1. And then the first time an ally uses an order, it summons a random unit with the same power from your deck. So you set up your deck with your boost on his deploy, and then you have an order unit out, and he pulls out another engine, and then the opponent has to deal with 2 engines a turn if they are not stopping him, because usually he's going to pull out a guy every turn with your orders based on how you set up the bronzes with this. It's incredibly strong. It is underrated, but that doesn't mean it's good. I think he's okay. He's a consideration. Let's think of the top of here, though. You consider him instead of like Demavend. I think Demavend's way better. But Kimbolt is a consideration if you play a more engine approach with more deck boost and stuff. I think he's quite good, actually. I don't think he actually makes it into good because you don't really see anyone playing him. But I think he's okay. You can consider playing him. It's not too bad. Next up, we have Reinforcements. Spawn and play a base copy of a bronze unit. This is played in Reavers. That's pretty much it. So we're going to stick it down here in Niche. Pretty short one on that one. It's very specific. Like, if your deck needs an extra copy of a specific card, you can play it. But outside of that, you're not going to. Next up, we have Reynard Odo. No, Odo. So 7 for 8. Whenever you play a unit, boosted by 1. So it's like an engine idea. You play this. 7 power is hard to get rid of, so it's probably going to be boosting. And you get to Grace 7, boost all your boosted units by 1. The problem is, as an engine card, it's not quite there, and Grace 12 is a big increase in power. Like, you got to give him 5, so you kind of have to mad charge him, because you're going to use your leaders on Maiden Shield, which means you don't have one for him to get +5. It's really hard to get his Grace to trigger. If his Grace was like less, it was like Grace 10 or something, I think he might be decent. But the fact that you pretty much never get this effect unless you're trying super hard means that you're only getting this 1 point turn engine, which isn't quite good enough, unfortunately. But yeah, I think he's weak. Maybe if you got a power so the Grace is more attainable, because if you do get the Grace, it's not too bad. But Knights don't swarm all that much. They do play a good number of units, but they don't like a swarm. So I think you do need to make the Grace a little easier to reach potentially. Next up, we have Roche Merciless. 4 for 12. Deploys, does 2 damage. If you kill something, gets Zeal, and spawns a Blue Stripes Commando. Now, this used to be a thing with Blue Stripes Commandos. You'd like use Roche, get another Commando, then you could get that Commando Zeal, and that'd be nice, and you could pull more out of your deck, you get another copy. It's just not Not even in Blue Stripes to actually even play him anymore, unfortunately. He's in weak to me. He's not even in niche for Blue Stripes, because Blue Stripes don't even like play him. He's going to fall down here. Put him with Boholt. They're pretty similar. Next up, we have our boy Ronvid the Incessant. I remember playing The Witcher 3, and this guy's showing up all the time. So, deploy boost self by 5. When you play a soldier, summon himself from your graveyard to an allied row. I think he's okay. He boosts himself by 5, so he's a 6 for 5. That's not good, but then the fact he comes back twice, it's 1 point of carryover, which isn't that much, and you have to play a soldier, but the fact that you bring him back as a 1 means you can kill him with Kedweni Revenants, which is really nice for getting their value. So I think he's okay. You consider playing him if you're playing like 2 Revenants in your deck. But other than that, like he's niche. We're doing a lot of baiting. Like, I don't mean to bait every card, but we kind of are. He's niche. Yeah. Sabrina. Fun fact for you guys, Sabrina is in a deck we're going to feature probably next patch. But she's disloyal, death wish, damage everything on its row by 1. Not by 1, by 3, and she's a 1. So if you play her ranged, you play her at the opponent's row, they've got 8 units on that row, and you kill her, probably with a Revenant, just for high rolly Disneyland stuff. All of a sudden, you're doing 24 damage. You're getting a Revenant, it's 28. That's never going to happen. She's too specific. Like, she's an anti-swarm card. If swarm is meta, she's not too bad. I say that, but she's so expensive. Like, 3 damage on a row. Lacerate's 2 damage. Lambert Swordmaster is 2 damage to them all, too. Like, they're just better and more consistent. Because the Deathwish thing, you kind of have to have the order set up to kill her. She is bad, I think. I am using her. Like, I've played at least 15 games with her for this patch. And I have not changed my mind about that. She's bad, and what else is bad is Sabrina's Inferno, because it does damage every non-Spectre by 1. If anyone destroyed, repeat it. This would be okay if Spectre Swarming, which is basically just Revenant, was good. It would be okay. It would only be okay in that deck if that was good. The problem is, like, if this said if anyone destroyed spawn Kedweni Revenant, now we're talking. But now it's like, repeat the ability, 2 damage to all the non-Spectres. You got to have only Spectres, because otherwise you're hitting yourself. This is terrible. This is a meme card. Next up, finally, we're out of meme tier. Like, why is everything meme or, like, excellent in this tier? It's kind of weird. Probably just our mood today. You never know. Seltkirk. That's Seltkirk. Let's get this right. So, 5 for 9. Order melee, duel, and enemy. So, Seltkirk's pretty straightforward. Duel's nice. You Inspired Zeal him at 7. I think he's going to be in okay. The problem for Seltkirk is that he fits an Inspired Zeal. And Inspired Zeal has exactly 3 leader charges, potentially 4 if they're going to use Radovid. Because usually if you play Radovid, if you Inspire Zeal, the Radovid get another charge, or he dies. So usually you'll get 4 leader charges in Inspired Zeal outside of the Radovid, which means you have 1 for Demavend, you have 1 for Rafar's Vengeance, and then you use the 2 on Kedweni Revenants or something else. You usually don't have an extra leader charge for Seltkirk, and the fact that it's 9 is pretty expensive, so his decks love to run consistency things like Hubert. So he's okay. You can consider playing him in Inspired Zeal, even in Shield Wall kind of, but the locks really hurt there. So I think he's going to fall just into okay. Although, if with a little bit of buffs to stuff like Ildiko and other Zeal Givers, he's not too bad. You can kind of think about him. He's definitely better than stuff down here, because he actually does have a lot of potential. You can consider playing him. Next up, we have Shani. Shani is a mage card. She doesn't read as a mage card. Zeal Order, summon a bronze human from your graveyard and give it doomed. Like, there's some decent bronze humans. The best one, obviously, being Carrick Marine here. You summon him back. It immediately can use its order. You're getting 7. That's a 13-point play. But really, you want to be summoning back your mages. She's to increase their patiences. And for that, she's going to niche. Yeah, she's in a niche. You don't see her outside of that. These are kind of the opposite ones. Like, this is playable kind of outside of mages, but this is super defiant. This is the mages card. I think I put them together for the same reason. Next up, we have Siege. Siege. What a classic. Recent classic, but classic. It spawns 2 siege engines that do damage. One is resupply, and then at the end it plays a bombardment, which blasts a bunch of points at the enemy. You've already seen these cards read the bronze ones, which is why I like doing the bronze ones first. But overall, Siege is a very powerful card. Like, Siege, I'm going to put Siege up here in excellent. There's Stockpile Siege, there's Inspired Zeal Siege. We had Kimbolt Siege, it's Pincer Maneuver. There's a lot of uses for this thing. It just has a ton of value in it, and a lot of the value is damage, so you can wipe the board pretty often. You can wipe the opponent's board with this, which is quite nice. Next up, we have Sigismund Dijkstra. Sigismund Dijkstra, 4 for 12. Order, play a boosted unit from your deck. Pretty rare. While on the deck, whenever it receives a boost by the same amount. So the idea here being, if you're going to put targeted boost in your deck, you put it on him and it gets doubled. They used to do this with Drakenborg, because Drakenborg, like I said, used to be boost. He could store the boost, not the vitality, like Sigi and Drakenborg. Obviously, the thematic connections there from the lore, but in the end, nowadays, you might see him every now and then to be eaten by Erland, but those decks are much more Erland based than him. I'm going to stick him in niche. The fact is with his order is that the order on him is going to be kind of hard, because you want to inspired zeal him. Like, you have to give him zeal to use his order, because he's so tall. When you play him, he gets answered by tall punish, and they don't want you to use the order. So the order is like almost non-existent. Next up, we have, is this Saleya? How do you say your name? Sile. Oh, that's right. I had the accent on the I, so I can't search it. Damage a unit by 2. What's an enemy unit on her? Sile de Tansarville. Sorry for pronunciation again, guys. So 4 for 6, it does 2 damage and order 2 damage. Now, this used to be a thing you'd set up for Revenants. Like, this is 2 damage. You could use a Revenant order, then you could use your order, do 2 more damage, set up another Revenant order. Unfortunately, this is just not quite what you want to be doing. Usually, it's better to have engines set up, like Reinforced Ballista or Caro Ballista, or even a Battering Ram or something. It's better setup. And the value is like 8 for 6 isn't great value, so unfortunately, she's a little bit weak. Yeah, I just think she's a little weak. Next up, we have a card that I have seen a bit of play, seen people play, and I don't understand, which is Thaler. So it's got formation 7 for 7. If either player is passed and the opponent's hand is not full, both players draw a card. Like, the idea here is you're thinning your deck. Sure, you're thinning your deck by 1. You're both draw, so you're both probably getting about the same value of card. Maybe you want to thin your deck down to exactly 1 for Priestess, Traveling Priestess, or Melitele decks will like to thin their deck too. So sometimes you see him played there. I do think still he's a little bit weak out. Like, he's okay in those decks, but do you really want to be playing him in those decks? Maybe you have to. I don't really play those decks, to be honest. So maybe you have to play him to get down to the correct card count. But like for 1 provision more, I could just play Roche or for Knickers or something, or even Hubert. So I think he's weak I think he's weak. I have seen people play him though. This is the one. I'm sure I could be wrong about this one. Tell me if you guys think I'm wrong. Next up, we have Maiden Shield. The Maiden Shield, I suppose. So Shield, Grace 8, spawn Bronwyn, and then 14 boost the Bronwyn. Is it going to show me Bronwyn here? I guess not. But Bronwyn is just a immune token card that can infuse something with an effect that doubles up the boost it gets from other effects. So overall, he's a really strong card in Knights. I'm going to give him good. He's a great card in Knights. If there wasn't this card, though, I don't think he'd be played, because you really need that last mad charge to give him his points. But definitely a good card. Really great in Knights. Next up, we have Tissaia. She resets the order of all the mages that use their order this turn at the end of the turn. So what you do with this, I think thematically you're supposed to use all the students and the alumni, save up all their orders, shoot them at one time, she'll reset them. What you end up doing with this is only playing with Meditating Mage, clicking all your Meditating Mage orders, resetting them so you can click them in round 2 after they get Resilience. That's extremely niche, and for that reason she's going in niche, perhaps unsurprisingly. Next up we have Trollolo. So he's got Zeal Order, lose his armor, and boost self by the same amount. Whenever an allied unit uses order, gain 1 armor. So ideally here you're spamming out orders, like say an Onager or Lyrian Arbalister deck with like Reinforced Ballista. You shoot a bunch of orders, you keep storing up armor. The armor on him means he's really hard to kill. If the opponent's using damage, he can get locked, which is annoying, but you have like Secret Service here in Northern Realms. So he takes a bunch of damage on the armor, it's getting value. Otherwise, he just boosts himself by the armor at the end of the round. All in all, pretty solid effect, and he's not too expensive. Like 7 provisions is definitely worth considering. I think I'll put him in okay. You don't see him all the time in these Arbalister decks, because often they'll want to play like Warfares or just cards that make more Arbalisters, but he's a consideration to put in those. Even sometimes in like Traveling Priestess decks, you'll see him. You know what? I'm going to give him up here. Yeah, he does see play Traveling Priestess. Not every Traveling Priestess, But I think more than half the Traveling Priestess decks I've seen do play Trollolo now. Yeah, I'm going to give him... He's in here. He's really in between these two for me. I'm going to put him here next to Kimbolt. I think they're pretty similar in terms of like their usage and stuff. He's used less, but he's got better ceiling. This is used more often. I don't know. It's one of these two. You guys let me know where you want Trollolo. Next up, we have Vandergrift. Great knight card. It's a knight. It's got resilience. Resilience is the best keyword in the game. 6 for 9. And it has Grace 12, gain the resilience again. So you can carry this guy over from round 1 to 2, give him Grace into round 3. What you do is you infuse him with the Squire's effect, so he keeps the infusion between rounds, where he keeps boosting himself, which gives him the Grace automatically. All in all, just a great knight card, kind of like Maiden Shield. Next up, we have Vandergrift's Blade, though. On the other hand, this is not a good card. So it does 5 damage and stores the destroyed unit's power. This is a very cool card. This is one of my favorite cards to play. I love this thing, but it's not that great. So you do 5 damage, and then you store the base unit's power. And next time you play a unit, boosted by the sword amount. So what you do with this, ideally, in a perfect world, is the opponent plays something that's like, say they play a King Trum, and then you hit it down to like 5 with a duel from Seltkirk, and then you hit it with a Vandergrift's Blade and store 20 points in it, and your Prince on Stasis is a 24-point duel. Like, that is the dream world effect. What usually happens is the opponent plays something, and you kill it. They like some Bronze Engine, you kill it with 5 because you need to get rid of it, and then next time you play is boosted by 5. Because it's really just not, it's just weak. No, it's bad. The 5 damage threshold is not that great. But to be honest, like, the value is there. If this was 7, would I play it? It's compared to like Tesha Mutton of Sword. No, probably not. This definitely needs buffs. Next up, we have Vernon Roche. So Disloyal, play top 2 cards of your deck, 2 for 9. The Melitele Traveling Priestess combos would not be possible without him. He's going up here. He just lets you play 2 cards at once. You thin your deck down to 2 cards. You play exactly those 2 cards. Those 2 cards, like your Onager Traveling Priestess, your Tridem Infantry Traveling Priestess. It's your combo. That deck's good. This card's like you can't make the deck without this. So I'm gonna put him in excellent. It's deck defining. Next up, we have Vess. So she got a buff recently. She's 6 for 7. That does 2 damage. So 8 points on deploy. And she's got to give a unit Zeal. Cooldown 3. Now, like I said, giving Zeal is actually really nice. And she's not the worst thing. Like, 6 is kind of hard to kill. So you can kind of remove or count on her as like a Zeal giver. I think after that, since they're both 6, I think she's about the same as Ildiko now. Ildiko's got a better ceiling if you don't kill her. And she's got the order for 4. But Vess is less likely to be targeted down because she's not as good at giving the orders out. But overall, I think Vess is pretty similar now. She's alright. You can consider her if you really want more Zeals in your deck. Next up, we have Vincent. Vincent is a niche card, I think. So Vincent, 3 for 6. Zeal order, set the power of an unboosted enemy to 1. If the meta is very many boost cards, and if you're playing like a Revenant deck, this could be pretty useful. Like just for example, at the moment, the most popular deck in the game that I see is Fruits. Like Fruits with the Griffins and the Fiends and such. If you just play this against that deck, because you're just gonna set their thing to 1 and kill it. Setting a Griffin to 1 is like 6. That's 9 for 6. Or it's not 9 for 6. It's 8 points of value plus his 3, so it's 11 for 6, which is really good. Just at the moment, even with that though, people don't play Vincent because it's too niche. A lot of decks will have cards that boost. Like the scary cards get boosted. The things you want to reset or set to 1 are the boosted cards, like Fallen Knight, are generally cards you want to reset. High base power cards are pretty uncommon, except against monsters, and this just makes him kind of hard to use, unless specifically you're playing Revenants, and I guess he's okay in there. I'm going to put him weak. I still think he's weak, even after all this. This one's going to be pretty painful. Yeah. I think it's Varaxis Prince. I think it's Varaxis is first. Yeah. Varaxis himself. So, you almost always play him in Form 3. If you play him. And he's got Veil Formation, Order, reset an allied non-neutral unit's order, and give it Zeal. So, when you play a soldier boosted by 1, like either of these are usually fine. Either are fine. The problem is, like, it's kind of the Dem event problem, right? For this, you're going to be playing Inspired Zeal with duels. If you're playing Inspired Zeal, it's just better to have Temple and Dem event and Rafard's Vengeance. There's no space for them. So I can't, in all honesty, I can't say it's a good card. Like, it's just completely outcompeted. No one plays this. I think maybe if it was like 11, maybe. It's just so hard to fit when there's things like Rafard's Vengeance and Dem event. They're just better. Like, these 4 right here are just way better. Then there's no reason to play him. The only reason you have to play him, really, is to reset duels. And if you play it on Sace, it's going to be last Sace, so you don't lose your points on it. You'd have to play double duels for him, and I think it's just not... at the moment, it's not good. That's tragic. Next up, we have Visigoth. 5 for 8 with 2 armor. He gets charge equal number of boosted allied units, and he has order damage unit by 1 with 1 charge. So 5 with 2 armor is pretty hard to kill. You ideally here, you boost all your guys up, you play this guy, and then you get charges. You need to spam with the charges. Problem is, Voimir is a better payoff, right? So what you do with you get how you usually do this is you play a bunch of Blue Stripes Commandos, for example, or a bunch of Reavers, and then you have a bunch of boosted units, and you take advantage of the boosted units. Voimir is better because it gets its effect right away, and doesn't have to wait a turn where this can get locked. So unfortunately, it's just not as good as Voimir in the decks that do want to play him. I think he's a little weak, sadly. Speaking of Voimir, he's the next card on the list. Voimir boosts an allied unit all copies by 1 and gives him 1 armor. So Voimir is super niche. The idea is here, he plays super well in Reavers because you have a bunch of Reavers spammed out, and he plays really well in Blue Stripes Commandos. But those decks aren't very good, so I think I'm going to have to stick him down here in the niche tier. Nothing else really spams a bunch of copies. I mean, like, you can use it technically on the Griffin Witcher Adepts. The problem there is that the shield's already blocking damage, so the armor is useless. It's just like a 1 point on everything. And at that point, it's not that valuable. Because you might as well be playing Bone Talisman, and not really Bone Talisman, but like the idea, let's just go with the idea. You're playing Bone Talisman, you're losing the 5 points of his base power, but it's not just the 1 unit's copies that are getting boosted. So I do think Voimir really only fits in the decks that specifically spam a bunch of the same card. And because of that, I think it goes in niche. It's definitely better than the other option here, which is the Visigoth, though. I did put him in niche, didn't I? Yeah, we did. Okay, cool. Next up, we have Visigoth. What the heck was that typing? Visigoth of Corvo, so 3 for 8. Zeal Order boost by 1. It has 1 charge when it comes down. Then whenever either player plays a card, it gains a charge. So this is absolutely nuts ceiling, right? Each turn, you're going to play 1 card at least, and some cards play other cards or spawn copies and stuff. So this is at least 2 points a turn of targeted boost. The ceiling there is super high. It's a 3 though, like 3 base power. He's bad. The base power is just too low. It's way too easy to remove. The fact that it's going to be like amnestied or swears is just like an insult, to be honest. I like this guy, though. He used to be okay. Next up, we have War Chariot. I like War Chariot. Where is it? There it is. So 5 for 7, resupply and zeal. Its orders give out 4 bleeding. That's actually decent value. If you just use it once, 9 for 7. That's not too bad. Like, it's not what you want, but on an engine, if it gets answered, you don't feel terrible. It's order ranged and crew move both. So if you need movement, it's an okay way to do it instead of a siege ladder. If you're playing a siege deck, they're both siege engines, so usually you'd play this one, I think. But the fact that it's got resupply is kind of nice. The fact that the bleeding gives you value is really nice. I think War Chariot's an alright card. I think you can consider playing it in siege decks. It's not too bad of an option. Usually you play other stuff over this, but it's like you could play it. It's not too bad. War Elephant, though, on the other hand, is just too expensive to meet that same criteria. At 12 for Visions, this thing's super expensive. I love this card, by the way. I think War Elephant's one of my favorite cards to play in Northern Realms. It's just hard to justify. It doesn't have Zeal, which kind of hurts. It's cooldown 6, so it's really hard to use twice. And if your opponent lets you... Actually, let's just be real here. If the opponent lets you use this order twice, it means they have like a Spores in their hand and they don't care. Or like a Tall Punish. But in theory, it's really cool, right? It has crew, gives himself 8 points, 16 for 12s. Actually, not even that amazing, to be honest. It's okay. Like, it's not bad. You feel... If you get 16 points out of this, you feel pretty alright. Like, it's not amazing. But It's super satisfying. I really like this card, but I can't say it's good. I can't say it's good. This is going to be going in the weak tier. It's just so expensive, and it goes really tall, and one card going really tall is usually really vulnerable. Next up, we have Windhelm. This is different, though. He goes really tall. Here's the difference, is that you don't need the crew, so it's 2 points a turn as long as he has a shield, and a shield wall, you can give him shield. And once he gets up to 10, you can give himself a shield. Here's the thing, though. If they're blocking damage on the shield, it's usually like you want to hit it with ping damage, or sometimes I have to hit it with like 2 damage or something. It's usually like that absorbs value, and the difference here is he goes really tall and get tall punished, but he's only 7 provisions, not 12, and this thing fits really well in Shield Wall, Golden Necker. It's definitely a good card. It gets played in that deck pretty often alongside you. Last up, we have the Runestone. I'm going to hover over it for 1 second and throw it in the medium tier. So it plays a Bronze Northern Realms card. No, you just would rather put the cards in your deck. There we go. Let's see, how do I feel with this tier list? I feel like I was extremely harsh on some stuff here, but maybe as I got through this, I wasn't as harsh as I thought I was. I thought we were going to end up like a ton of cards in just the trash tier, but you know what? Let me take a look. I want to make this often, by the way. I'm going to change this to not played often, because that makes me feel a lot better. Actually, look at this normally. I'm going to say normally not played. All right, I like that. You know what we're going to call this? We're going to call this has potential. I like has potential. Has potential with buffs. With a buff. I like that more. Let's do this. Not great, but has potential. I like that. That makes me feel a lot better. So we take a look at this tier list overall. As far as we look at the excellent top stuff up here, how do we feel about this? These are all amazing cards. Yep, great, great, good, great. Yep, this all makes sense to me. At this moment, you can maybe argue these two, Erland and Mutagenerator, could be like these two down here. These two you could argue maybe that they're good or niche specifically, but I have seen like a good amount of Mutagenerator and Erland decks. Usually they go in the same deck, but you can use them each outside of the other one, which is kind of cool. So you could play these each either way. I think I'm going to leave them up here because their decks are good enough that I wouldn't say they're bad. They're like decent. As far as good cards, yeah, these are all good cards. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. Okay. Trollolo. I think I'll put him up here. He's pretty good in literally Priestess decks. Yeah, I like this. I think he does deserve here. He's at the bottom. I could see either way on this one. A lot of these cards I could see either way on for like one tier up or down. These are all pretty niche though. Yeah, these are niche. Very niche. The other one I might consider moving up is Flotsam. I think Flotsam is okay. It has more than one use. I'll put him okay. I like him in okay. I think I had him there before and took him out. I like this in okay. You can consider it for devotion decks. Oh, let's just say potential with buffs. I like him. The fact that I like him and I've used him doesn't mean he deserves to be up here, though. We'll leave him there. Weak. Yeah, these cards don't really see play. I could see an argument for Keira to be weak, not bad, but I've been playing a lot of games with her, and I can't stand it. Like, she's really cool, but she's too easy to answer because she has to stay out on the board for so long. I don't want to move any of these cards up. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. This will be the Northern Realms tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you enjoyed. I'll be back here next time. Northern Realms, I think, is my least favorite. I think I have like 1,000. I think I have like 800 games with Northern Realms. So if I'm wrong with this, let me know. But hopefully you guys enjoyed either way. I'm sure we can argue over some of these. I'm curious to see what you guys would play slightly differently. And we will see you next time.
That'll be it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. And you can check out some more videos over here. And thanks for watching.